Hi there, this is Matt with State of Flux, and happy Halloween, everybody. That's right, every 6 months I review a different Halloween movie. I started a couple years back in April 30th, the halfway point to Halloween, with my first review for Halloween, and we've made it all the way up to Halloween 5. It's known elsewhere as The Revenge of Michael Myers, however, that's not what's attached to the head of this movie. And this is a movie that I feel kind of weird about because there's stuff I really like in this movie, but on the whole it's not particularly good. However, the stuff that I like in this movie, I like better than most of the stuff that worked best in number 4. However, number 4 is clearly a better movie than this. It's like a stronger film, so to speak, but number 5 is scarier, has more like gruesome slasher kills, which you kind of go for in these kind of movies, and offers something kind of new from Michael, which is genuine emotion in a weird way, and it paints his characters different than we've seen him before in an intriguing way. But that doesn't stop the film from having a panoply of like annoying habits. So I kind of land on this film as being fairly similar to number 4. It's an extension of that film, failing to capitalize on the thing that that film set up, which had already been failed to be capitalized on by the Friday the 13th franchise with the Tommy Jarvis character. If you remember that the Jamie Lloyd character at the end of part 4 succumbs to her like Myers-ness in her blood and brutally stabs her mom. As Sam Loomis is like, no, no! And that's kind of the end of the film, leading you to believe that she is picking up where her uncle left off. And that is all but abandoned. Yes, she did that. Now she's in psychiatric treatment. She's mute for most of this movie until she's not and perfectly fine. And, like, I don't know. That stuff didn't really work for me. They also arbitrarily kill Rachel from the previous movie. These films, the genre of the slasher film tends to take the surviving hero, final girl from the previous installment, and like blithely killing them for no reason than to shock the audience, because the true hero of these stories is actually the villain, the Michael Myers, the Freddy, the Jason. And that's something that I really don't like, and the film doesn't really earn, especially since Rachel was a somewhat like compelling character in that previous film. That said, I did speak about the things that I like. Even though this film is very obviously low budget, it is kind of the worst looking film of the 5 film set of those first 5. The budgetary limitations on the film kind of work to the film's benefit. It has a grittier kind of look and a vibe, especially in the Midwest look of the suburbia. And when you get to like the pseudo-haunted house elements at the end of the film, they really did a good job with the art direction to make it look atmospheric and creepy. However, it's not photographed particularly well, but I do think it's photographed better than number 4 was during the entire duration of that film, so I do find that to be a marked improvement. The other thing that I liked about it is the connection that Michael shares with Jamie. Jamie is trying to reach out to him, to try to find that piece of humanity in Michael that nobody seems to believe is there, because he is an essence of pure evil, as Dr. Loomis has been saying for 4 films by this point. And she is the first person to connect with him in any kind of meaningful way. He even removes his mask for her. We'll talk about that mask. But it's kind of a strong scene, and one of the best scenes of the first 5 movies, period. I really like that moment. Enough so that I would kind of rather watch this film to the fourth one because of that soul little vibe that you get in that scene. That being said, there's a lot of stuff in this film that falls flat for me. Um, Michael has kind of returned to how he was in the second film, where he's just the mindless mayhem machine. However, he has like this weird consciousness to him where like he's driving a car and just drives the new hero girl, I believe her name was Tina, around for a good section of the film. And like she's annoying him, and you'd expect him to like rile up and attack, but he starts listening to her. She's like, pull over here. Hey, you didn't pull over. And then he's like, fine, and then pulls over. And I was just like, that seems out of character. Like, nothing about this seemed organic. It all seemed incredibly manufactured. I did like the fact that Michael is such a common name, but that for the first time there's another person named Mike or Michael in the franchise, which I appreciated, and that's where a bit of confusion gets stemmed from. But Michael wearing a new mask suddenly did not play for me. First of all, it was a weird Dick Tracy looking mask, and that was perplexing. And while we're on the subject of masks, what the hell were they doing with this mask, man? Like, arguably it does look better than the fourth one, but that's just because that fourth one was genuinely god-awful. This one, like, they forgot to tuck in the mask, which was the most annoying part of it, and the hair is like weirdly longer, and I don't know, I think they tried to do a thing where they made it look like it had aged a year, but it just didn't, and it looked like he just like half-assedly put it on, but he would have had to have done that multiple times throughout the film, so I don't know, it stole the element away, of reality away from this. Dr. Loomis is characterized slightly different in this one, where he's trying to be there and help Jamie Lloyd, and some of those aspects I think work pretty well. But the strongest aspect of his character comes at the end of the film, where for the first time in these 5 movies, he acts like a true doctor would in trying to get through to Michael. He stops being like, you're nothing, you're evil, we need to kill it, to being like, there is humanity left in you, I know there is, and you just need to feel it, Michael, feel it. And that is the best use we've ever gotten in these first 5 films of Dr. Loomis doing his job in his profession. That is what he should have been done in the previous ones. I had relatively sharp criticisms of particularly that first movie, but those first 2 movies, in that Dr. Loomis has not aged well, because by modern day sensibilities, he is terrible at his profession. He should not have that profession if that's what he truly believes, and having no faith in the rehabilitation of this boy, literal boy, by the time he gives up on him. Is like, what, 21 or something like that? And the mind is still growing and stuff like that until you're like 30 or 35. So, like, he should know that, like, it's a day-by-day constant state of change. It doesn't age well by today's standards. And this is the first time we actually see him competently doing something with his job for both Jamie and Michael. So I do give the film that little benefit as well. But this is a kind of by-the-numbers movie, where there's no real reason to watch it, other than you're invested in this franchise and it gets you to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, forever on. It's kind of just meandering more of the same. I do like that he's characterized a little more similarly to how he was in 1 and 2 than he was in number 4, where he seemed very calculated, Michael Myers did, and that just seemed strange to me, and in contradiction from what we'd learned about him in 1 and 2. This, we get a little more characterization similar to that first couple of films, but still, it's just like, what are we doing? We're hitting these same beats over and over again, and I'm going to address as to why that is in a minute. But around this time, and with the previous installment as well, you got a shift. Michael Myers and Halloween kind of really kick-started the slasher film genre. There were a couple beforehand, Black Christmas, Peeping Tom, Psycho, obviously, that were effective slasher films. But Halloween popularized it in a way that it launched a genre that dominated the 80s. And Friday the 13th emerged, and this film series and Friday the 13th were in conflict with each other because Halloween was determined to be more atmospheric and maybe a touch more grounded. Friday the 13th wanted to show you the brutal kills and really get you to root for Jason. And so suddenly Michael Myers had to compete with Jason. And that went back and forth a couple of times. And by the time the Return of Michael Myers and Revenge of Michael Myers came out, we got a genre rebirth within the slasher genre, which was the element added of the supernatural slasher with Freddy Krueger. And you saw both Friday the 13th and Halloween have to compete with that franchise. And the way they did that was they took their relatively grounded killers, grounded in that they were both humans, that seem to be unkillable, but they can die at the end of the movie, however very grounded as being purely that just human, suddenly get elements of supernatural. 2 years prior to this film, Friday the 13th resurrected Jason as sort of the Jason zombie that he would go on to be through most of the rest of the canonical franchise until he was humanized again for the remake. And then Michael Myers, in this installment, gets the little druid symbol on the arm and the introduction of the man in black, which is baffling to me, other than to just create some kind of like connection and mysticism to bring us to the next one and maybe slowly, softly connect it to that third film. And like they layered in sprinkles of that in the second film as well, I guess. However, that's us doing the homework to connect it all more than any thought was actually put into what the plan was to do with that. That will be more discussed next time around, but I just thought I'd talk about it here. The last thing I want to talk about, kind of up front, about this film proper, before I give its like 2-ish star rating. It's 2.5, it's fine. It's on par with 4, not as intriguing as 3, better than 2, and a far cry from 1. The film opens with a soft retcon of after Michael gets horrifically shot and then falls backwards. He falls down a mine shaft suddenly, which carries him off to river or lake or something, where he's found by a man who cares for him, a la Bride of Frankenstein. And 1 year later, Michael revives to carry on his evil killing spree. And that's kind of all that remains of, and by my understanding, this is just like, it wasn't even part of this original concept, but there were 2 other concepts for this film, or I guess 3 other concepts for this film before this is the film that we got. And this is something that I really wanted to talk about. We're going to circle back to the Bride of Frankenstein of it all in a minute. There was a concept for this film that was going to pick up with Jamie Lloyd 10 years later or 15 years later. No, I think she was supposed to be a teenager, so probably 10 years later, coming out of psychiatric care, but falling to her whims and being the killer. And then Michael was going to return and try to kill her because she was interfering with his purpose. And so they were going to have a fight of the family of slashers. And I think that would have been an interesting concept to see, but I see why you don't make that movie. And I don't think it would have been better than this. It might have been more interesting or more creative, certainly, than this film was, but better, I don't know about that. There was another version of that where she was going to be much younger, played by Danielle Harris, continuing the murder spree, and you were going to see Michael come back but try to kind of coax her into being a killer more, and then she and Michael would go hand in hand at the end of the film as a family unit of killers. That was another idea that was floated. Again, kind of more of the same in the fourth one, and I don't know if it would have been any better than the film we got. However, there is a version of this that I do think would have been better than the film we got. And that was, I want to say his name was Robert Harder's pitch to the studio, to the Accords, which was to have the film pick up immediately at the end of the fourth one, where Michael's body has fallen and is tangled in rebars and like construction work and vines and stuff like that, and he's hanging there, and a storm comes, and that storm blasts a burst of electricity funneled directly into his body, reviving Michael Myers, the body, and he becomes the Shape once more. However, he wanted to do a sort of soft Frankenstein retelling, where once Michael is rebirthed and goes to continue into the world, he's a new soul. His soul had left his body, and he is not Michael Myers. It is a new being that awakens in this body, having not the consciousness of Michael or anything, and is just this fresh new being that Sam Loomis discovers and realizes is not the consciousness of Michael Myers. And the whole townsfolk are the villains of this film because they're trying to kill him for what he's done. And the film would have ultimately ended with him allowing the town to tear him apart and get the revenge on the body that has meant so much to their fear and their chaotic world that this body had brought forth to them. And I think that's an interesting concept. I like the idea of Michael is dead. This body is still alive, and there's a consciousness in it that isn't Michael, that is trying to understand this world and the cruelty of it when he's in the body that created the cruelty. That is a compelling idea, and it's something that you could really play with and tell an intriguing story. But I think that's the biggest issue with this, is the Accords didn't want to take chances, and that's been a repeated refrain often in this franchise. The first film was its own unique reworking of Black Christmas, and it's good. It's not necessarily the most creative movie, but it sure as shit did it right. And when they went to the Carpenters and they pitched the idea of doing it as like an anthology series, for the second one we'll do something different, they were like, no, we want more of the night he came home. And they convinced the Carpenter, Deborah Hill duo to make that film on the pretense that they'll make the next one an anthology, and they reluctantly did so, and they made a definitive end for Michael and Laurie and Loomis and stuff like that. they took a creative route for the third one, and I think the route, if you listen to my review, that they took was not necessarily the wrong route. I just think that that was the wrong movie to put forth. You should have done something a little more grounded, a little safer, to just kind of get the general idea of what this anthology was, or maybe put 2 out in back-to-back years, just to get the world into a rhythm of, oh, we're going to do Halloween every year and it's going to be a different franchise and maybe eventually we can revisit these. When that whole experiment failed, they went back to the well and made a 4th film that is kind of essentially just a reboot, where they are taking the first and second film and mushing them together and delivering what 4 is. And 5 operates on the same beats as 4, which operated on the same beats of 2 and 1. So the thing that's killing this franchise is the Akkad's need to make the same movie over and over again, and fight and resist any kind of general creativity. This film had 3 options with which to do something new, creative, and different. Either having a reluctant Jamie Lloyd becoming a killer as a young child, having an older Jamie Lloyd being an active killer in conflict with Michael as sort of like teen adult conflicting killers, or having this Frankenstein reworking that somewhat tethers to what happens in the opening of this film. All of that was resisted to give us more of the same, but when they, at the last second, decided to put a wee bit of mysticism in order to compete with Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, and by this point, Child's Play even, you get this weird druid thing that they sort of connected from the 3rd movie that was mentioned in the 2nd, and will not be, I assure you, capitalized on in the next film. I will be talking about that film in 6 months' time, and that will be Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. But for Halloween 5, we get another retread, more of the night he came home, and it's dull by this point, and pretty soon this franchise will need a much needed invigoration, and it will get that. We just have one more movie to get through, which is weird because it's one of the more creative installments. It's just, they're forcing a creative element on a film that has by this point been so unprincipled with any kind of creativity it just can't sustain it. That was designed as something very grounded to begin with. And what you got is a film that most fans really kind of turn their back on. This is not one of the ones that is most well liked. And of the 3 films that came out in 1989, this was a year that had a Freddy, a Jason, and a Michael. I think this was the worst of the 3, and that's not saying that Dream Child or Jason Takes Manhattan are any good either, but they had a watchability to them that this film kind of is lacking, even though I don't think it's that bad. I think it's better than its reputation. It's just not very good. So there you have it. That's that. We'll see where it lands in my ranking a couple of years down the line when I've finished watching the whole franchise in 6-month increments. But let me know what you thought of Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, as the poster tells me. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.